Hello, Mr. Wonkin here. How's everybody doing today? Good to see you. In recent months, we've seen a lot of conflict, debate, disagreement regarding COVID-19. So you've got on one side a lot of politicians, medical professionals, mayors, governors, people in the media, celebrities telling you should socially distance, telling you should put on a mask, telling you you should avoid large gatherings to prevent the spread of the disease. On the other side, you have a lot of people saying, I don't want to avoid social gatherings. I don't want to put on a mask. And in fact, there are a lot of news stories and YouTube videos of people getting into fights, attacking other people, customers throwing screaming fits in stores after they've been told they have to put on a mask before they come into the store. And a few cases, there are very few, but a few cases of people actually stabbing or shooting someone to death over the issue of whether or not they should wear a mask. Most people look at these few cases of people physically attacking someone, and the 2 or 3 in which someone was killed. These are the lunatic fringe, right? This isn't everybody. Most people are being pretty reasonable about it. Even if they kind of disagree, they're disagreeing reasonably. Most people are like that. But there is a huge question that we're dealing with in terms of this that is a big question that our culture has been dealing with for quite a few years. And that is, can we really trust experts, scientists? Can we trust the people that are telling us that they know what they're talking about? They've studied this. Are they really telling us the truth? Is it really just a conspiracy among the so-called experts to control us, to manipulate us, to take away our freedoms? What I'd like to do is explore that question and look at what science and expertise actually are, whether or not we do actually trust those things. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about the costs and benefits of allowing the experts to tell you what's true. I'd like to take a look at it in rational terms and kind of break it down. I would encourage everyone to step back and think about it in rational terms, not in terms of what you believe, what you want to be true, what your political or religious or cultural affiliation tells you is true, but rather what makes the most sense. To begin with, let's consider a scenario. This is an imaginary scenario. You're at a family dinner, and you have 2 cousins there. One of your cousins is a mechanic, and specifically this cousin has worked on, let's say, Toyota engines for 20 years. So he knows a lot about Toyota engines and knows about engines in general. One of your other cousins is a doctor and has been a doctor for 20 years and is specifically, let's say, a dermatologist. So he knows what he's talking about specifically in terms of skin conditions and things like that, but medicine in general, right? So ask yourself a couple of questions. If you have been having some issues with your Toyota Highlander, which of those cousins are you going to approach to get advice from? In another scenario, you have a weird rash on your arm. Which of those cousins are you going to approach to get some advice on that rash? I think these are pretty simple questions. And of course, this is a really obvious scenario. You can look at it in terms of a lot of other things as well. I mean, who are you going to hire to rewire the breaker box in your house? A person who has 20 years experience managing an office, or a person who has 20 years experience in electrical engineering or electrical construction, who are you going to hire to design a 50-story skyscraper? An architect? Or, again, an office manager? Or an electrician? These are simple questions. You're going to go to the expert. This is how we live our lives. We trust in experts on a day-to-day basis, and we don't question them. So think about it like this. Experts are people who are scientists, technicians, engineers, people who have been educated and trained and have had experience and have done research. They spend years learning their fields and working within their fields. They spend years honing their knowledge and expertise. And with almost no exceptions, they know more than non-experts about their areas of expertise. And we accept this. Think about it like this. How much of your life, think of how much of your life and the human environment in which you live relies on expertise to function properly. So your car, we talked about the mechanic, your television, your cell phone, your computer, your microwave oven, the fact that you don't know anybody who's infected with polio, the fact that people with diabetes are able to live long and healthy lives because we've developed treatment to take care of diabetes, whereas 150 years ago they would have had a very short and very uncomfortable life. All of those things rely on years, arguably centuries worth of the development of the science and the expertise on those matters in order to work correctly. And we don't question those things, of course, because it makes sense. We don't question the science that goes into how our television works, for instance. The television works, right? There's a common argument that scientists lie so that they can make money, right? It's all about making money, and you'll hear this a lot in terms of climate science. But here's the reality of it. We live in a capitalistic world. Capitalism is pretty much the standard all over the world, with some small exceptions. Profit is the driving motive behind most people's jobs, most people's livelihood is grounded in profit. A lying scientist is not going to keep making money because incorrect science doesn't work. It's pretty simple. Bad science doesn't get good results, and so therefore it won't make profit. So basically, if you're just lying to agree with all of the other scientists who are also lying, how are you going to make money on that? Remember, funding for scientific research, a huge portion of that comes from profit-based organizations that are looking to develop new ways of doing things, new methods for solving problems. These things get sold, they make money. If they don't work, they don't sell. So put aside whether you think science makes sense or not, the profit motive encourages science to actually work. It doesn't encourage science to not work and to just go along to get along. So that's a feeble argument that scientists just lie to agree with all the other scientists. It's not a bad argument. That's not really rational. And yes, there are some exceptions to that. Occasionally, a bad idea will make it into the market, and a consumer base that is gullible will buy a product that doesn't work very well. But generally, those things don't last very long. Eventually, those things fall out of favor because they don't work, and the truth comes out eventually. Here's what I would ask you to think about. If you think you know the truth You're questioning, you're uncertain about whether or not the experts are actually telling you the truth. There are some questions I think that you need to ask and answer these questions honestly. Take your opinion out of it. Ignore what you believe for a moment and ask yourself these questions and honestly try to be as honest as you can in answering them. So the first question, and this is the fundamental question that we're dealing with here. Can the experts, the scientists, be wrong about something? The answer to that is yes. And that's really what drives a lot of people's doubt in terms of expertise in science. Yes, scientists are wrong sometimes, therefore we reject it. But the fact is, they're usually not. They're usually correct. So while skepticism is useful, and skepticism is what drives a lot of scientific work, a lot of expertise, a lot of the research that experts do is driven by skepticism. Are we sure about this? Let's double check it some more and some more and some more. Let's try to get more in-depth understanding of it. But skepticism is not a reason to outright reject science and expertise, because by itself, it doesn't prove anything. It only doubts, right? It's good to have a little bit of skepticism. It's good to be willing to accept that maybe you were wrong, or maybe they were wrong, maybe someone was wrong about something. So could the experts be wrong? Yes. Usually they are not wrong. So that's the place to start. The second question, and this one I think is probably the most important question, and I think it's the one that people are the least honest with themselves about. What is your expertise on the issue? If you're questioning what the experts are saying, what expertise do you have on this issue? What education do you have on this issue? What training do you have on this issue? What research have you done on this issue? If you don't have expertise, your opinion on the matter is not really all that relevant. So, and here, Ben Shapiro says, facts don't care about your feelings. I'm going to manipulate his statement and say facts don't care about what your opinion is. It doesn't matter what your opinion is. That has no relevance to whether or not something is true or untrue. So if you have no expertise on a matter, questioning the experts is really not very rational, because you don't have the training. You haven't done the research. And let's be clear about research. Let me make a statement about research. Looking for proof of what you think is true on the internet is not the same as research. It's easy to find information on the internet or documents, YouTube videos, blogs that agree with even bad scientific ideas, even incorrect ideas. Look up white supremacy and you'll find some very, very interesting and incorrect descriptions of history that are there to support the idea of white supremacy, right? You can publish anything on the internet. The internet is open. So just searching for something to validate what you think is true is not the same as doing actual research. You need to have education and training in the field, and then you need to actually research within that field, and you need to have that research double-checked by other experts in the field, and on and on and on. Real research is actually pretty extensive stuff. So always making a claim about an issue that you have no expertise on equates to a baseless claim, right? So ask yourself that question. I don't trust the experts, but what is my expertise? If I have none, then you have nothing to stand on. The third question, and it kind of relates to that, and here's where I think we really get a lot of the skepticism, the excessive trust of skepticism. Why are you rejecting the science, the expertise on the issue? What is your reason for reject? And I think this is another one that people are not really honest about. If you really break it down, here's what I would argue. People accept the science and the expertise of everything except for two things. Things that disagree with their political point of view and things that are inconvenient to them. So, for instance, look at, like I said, your cell phone. There's a lot, there's centuries of science that go into the way your cell phone works. Nobody's arguing about that at the dinner table. Nobody's debating that in presidential candidate debates, right? There are no strong opinions about the physics that goes into designing and building cell phones because politics doesn't fit in with that. And it's not really inconvenient to anybody to agree with the physics and the chemistry that go into building a cell phone. But if you look at something like climate science, there's a lot of politics in that. And everybody knows pretty clearly where that line is in terms of climate science. Where the different people who trust the scientists tend to be on the left, people who don't trust the scientists tend to be on the right. It's a political divide. So what I would argue is that people don't reject climate science for rational reasons. They don't reject climate science because their own climate science expertise calls the science into question. They reject it because it's a political choice to reject it. That's not a good reason. That's not rational thinking. And it comes to the same thing in COVID, although COVID's a little bit different. There does appear to be a line. The people on the right tend to reject what a lot of the experts are saying. Some people on the right. And the people on the left tend to be more accepting of the expert opinions. But I think with COVID, a lot of it has to do with convenience. I want to have a party with all my friends and my family. It's inconvenient that the experts have said we shouldn't be having large gatherings, so I ignore the science and have the party anyway. Putting on a mask is a tiny inconvenience, really small inconvenience. So therefore, I don't agree that masks, it's not about whether or not the science or the expertise regarding putting on a mask to prevent the spread matter or makes sense. It's not about whether or not that makes sense. It's about whether or not I find it convenient. I choose not to wear a mask because I say I don't agree, but I don't have any expertise in epidemiology. I haven't done the research on whether or not a mask will prevent the spread of the disease. I've only just imagined that it doesn't make sense. So I think you need to ask yourself, and you need to be honest, why am I disagreeing? Am I disagreeing because people who agree with my politics also disagree? If so, you're on shaky ground. Am I disagreeing because it's inconvenient to agree with the science or the expertise? If so, you're on shaky ground. So the next question you want to ask is, and I think this is an important one to consider, what is the cost of deferring to the experts on an issue? What am I losing by trusting the people who call themselves the experts, the so-called scientists? In most cases, nothing. And this is why we almost never question expertise or science. We accept it without question because it doesn't cost us anything to do so. Sometimes there is a little bit of a cost. Sometimes there is a little bit of a monetary cost, right? So, for instance, in terms of climate change, there is a monetary cost to overhauling our energy system, changing the way we do manufacturing, right, in order to counteract some of these environmental problems. That does cost money. And it's not surprising that a lot of the anti-climate change commentary is funded very heavily by oil companies, right? You know, that's not surprising. In order to wear the masks, you have to buy them, right? And then there's the inconvenience factor of putting on the mask. But again, thinking about it in rational terms, you have to ask this question: does the cost refute the facts? Does the cost rationally argue against the claims of the experts and the scientists? No, it doesn't. It's pretty simple. The fact that it is going to cost a little bit of money, for instance, to change our energy system for environmental reasons, has no bearing on whether or not the climate change argument is bad, right? Has no bearing on it whatsoever. Now, it is something to consider, and that's where a lot of the debate has come in terms of COVID. Losing money, businesses losing money, people losing their jobs and things like that. That is a big thing. So that is something to consider in terms of how we respond to it. And we're looking for the best ways of responding to it without the economic consequences. And I think we can't completely do that. We're going to have some economic consequences as a result. But what is the cost of deferring to the experts? Sometimes there is a cost. But that doesn't mean that the experts are wrong, right? The last question, and this comes up a lot, this especially, you've heard this a lot in terms of the masks. Haven't they changed the story several times on fill in the blank with whatever issue you're arguing? This is kind of how science and expertise work. Science is a constant development. A true scientist seeks to find ways to understand, perpetually find new ways to better understand the way the world works. And so, yes, we figure out that the way we thought it, or what we thought was true, is a little bit different from that. Here's a better way of understanding, or we find some nuances by studying it. The fact that the story is changing actually shows that the experts, the scientists, are doing the work to get better understandings of it. So, like, for instance, let's look at the masks. They told us, and this was a mistake, this was a huge mistake, they told us toward the beginning not to use masks because they wanted to prevent a run on the market for PPEs. That was a huge mistake. And then later they changed and said, yes, start using face coverings. Then they said, well, certain types of face covering. Well, they just keep changing their story. They don't know what they're talking about. No, the fact is they're studying it. They've done extensive research, extensive testing on different types of face coverings, different brands or different materials in the masks to see which actually work. And they found, you can actually look it up and read the science. It's pretty simple. It's not really that complicated in terms of how they studied this stuff, and they found that certain types of face coverings work, that certain types of face coverings don't really help at all. So they've refined their advice. It's not that they're changing their mind because they don't know what they're talking about. It's that they're changing what they're telling us because as they study it more, they understand it more. It's pretty simple. So yes, the fact that they're changing their story is not telling us that they don't know what they're talking about. It's telling us that they're refining their understanding of it, and they're giving us advice. They're changing the advice as their understanding becomes refined. So technology, medicine has steadily improved for centuries. And one reason for that is that science and expertise are both reliable and functional. we would not have developed to the point where we have cell phones. And as a person who's almost 50 years old, the cell phone is like the kind of sci-fi stuff that we didn't believe would ever happen when I was a kid. We would not have come to the point where we have these types of devices if science didn't work. All of the scientific research that went into developing these things, the physics, the chemistry, the engineering design and things like that, if science wasn't trustworthy, these things wouldn't work. This is just a basic fact. So it makes sense to trust experts and scientists and to trust what they're telling us, right? It's impossible for one individual person to understand the entirety of the physical world. It's impossible. But that's okay because we have experts and we have scientists in specific fields who've received a lot of education, who've done a lot of research, and they've double-checked the research that other scientists and experts have done. Other scientists and experts have checked their research, and so we don't need to, all of us, understand everything because we have experts to do that specific type of understanding for us. And the fact is, skepticism is useful, as I've said before, but skepticism is not a scientific truth. It's not a proof of something. It's only doubting. And having a little bit of skepticism is absolutely useful. But remember that skepticism is proof of nothing. And the reality is this: the current model that the scientists, the experts are giving us is the best model we have. That is a basic, fundamental fact of human civilization. You can't escape that. And then another thing that's really important to remember: scientific truths are not determined by opinion. Your opinion, unless it's based on training, education, expertise, and extensive research, is irrelevant to whether or not the expert claims about a particular issue are true. So I would encourage everyone to do a few things. Be honest with yourself. Examine when you're questioning what an expert is telling you, when you're questioning what the scientists are saying about a particular matter. Be honest with yourself. Why are you questioning it? What is your expertise? Are you really just getting on a political bandwagon? Or are you being rational in terms of the issue at hand? And if you have no expertise, guess what? That's okay. Because there are experts that you can listen to and trust. And I would encourage you to give the experts the benefit of the doubt because they are almost always right. And they are always more knowledgeable about their area of expertise than you, unless you are more knowledgeable than them on that particular matter. So, some things to think about there. I'm probably preaching to the choir. You know, I'm sure people who disagree with me on any of these issues are just going to outright reject anything that I have to say, and they'll have some clever, circuitous logic to reject what I'm saying and continue rejecting expertise in science. But again, I strongly encourage all of you to be honest with yourselves about what you know and what you can know and what you can reasonably offer up in terms of good opinions or meaningful opinions about things, especially things that you have no expertise in. All right, so thanks for watching. Give me some suggestions, some comments. Love to hear what everybody thinks.